Cinemajaw is sponsored by Overcast, an independent podcast app that embraces the open world of podcasting instead of locking it down. No exclusives, no premium content, no paywalls. Just a great podcast app for everyone. Get it for free in the App Store. And we thank them for their support. Cinemajaw, the greatest movies podcast ever, recorded on location at Cards Against Humanity in Chicago. My name is Matt Kay, and with me is
Rye, the movie guy, and sitting inside the fish tank is producer Pat.
Hey guys, how's it going?
This week on Cinemajaw, Matt, we take a real long time to get to our list.
Yeah. You know what? That's actually true. We had some behind-the-scenes tech difficulties.
It's true. But we take a real long time to get to our top 5 sequels that took too long.
Yeah, but don't worry, Jawheads. This should be a nice, tight episode.
Yes, exactly. But lately, more and more, we're seeing movies, sequels, come out from films that are 15, 16 years old, 20 years old. And it's the new thing because the nostalgia factor. And this week we're looking at 5 times it didn't work because it just took too long.
Right. Yeah. These are the ones that failed because there have been good success stories where they are able to revive a franchise. These aren't those. These are the failures.
Correct. Ties into one of our reviews this week. Besides that, though, we have a lot more going on this show, don't we, Pat?
Yeah, this week we are also going eye for an eye on Charlie's Angels.
And because we have no guests this week, we have 3 reviews for you. 2 capsule reviews of Ford v. Ferrari and Midway, and a full review of Dr. Sleep.
Yes. Talk about a sequel with some timeline.
Yeah. There's been a number of years between The Shining and now Dr. Sleep.
Exactly. So we'll have a review of that. Plus, last month, Chris Lee, Jawhead, who's won the riddle in the past and actually took you on in trivia. I believe he won.
You know what? I think I won, actually.
I don't know. We'll ask Chris. I'm pretty sure he won last time.
Well, I mean, I am undefeated, so that'd be weird.
That was back some time ago. Well, Chris ended up winning the October riddle, and instead of a prize pack, he wanted to take you on in trivia. So in honor of Ford v. Ferrari, we are going to be playing Matt Damon, Christian Bale movie trivia. We'll get Chris on the phone for a rematch. How's that sound?
That sounds like fun.
I like that, too.
I do, too.
Because all the Jawheads out there are always cheering for whichever Jawhead is taking you on.
That's right. Yeah, and plus we get to talk to Chris, who's a great guy up in Canada.
I agree.
See how it's going up there.
I agree. So it's a pretty full show, Matt.
Indeed.
And if that wasn't enough, one must remember, we are celebrating Woody Harrelson all month of November.
This is fantastic.
So that is where we are going to start. Let's start with a Woody Harrelson fact.
All right. Today's Woody Harrelson fact revolves around his Oscar nomination for the film The People vs. Larry Flynt. Despite being portrayed in a nominated movie, Larry Flynt was refused an invitation to attend the 1997 Academy Awards. So to make sure that Larry Flynt was present, Woody Harrelson brought him to the awards as his +1.
That's awesome.
That is super awesome. It's pretty lame that they wouldn't invite him. He's the subject of the movie.
Right. So many times when you're watching the Academy Awards, just for instance, when they made I, Tonya about Tanya Harding, they would cut and you would see Tanya Harding out in the audience.
Sure.
And so on and so forth whenever there is a subject of a biopic kind of deal. Mm-hmm. Funny. They just felt, let's just not invite Larry.
Well, Larry
Flynt.
Larry Flint's a controversial figure, I suppose. But, I mean, hey, if the movie's nominated, you just got to suck it up and invite the guy.
I agree. Woody Harrelson, I think, did a good thing.
I think he did, too.
Awesome. All right. Brings us to Eye for an Eye.
All right. This week on Eye for an Eye, we're talking about Charlie's Angels. When a young systems engineer blows the whistle on a dangerous technology, Charlie's Angels are called into action, putting their lives on the line to protect us all. The film stars Kristen Stewart, Naomi Scott, and Elizabeth Banks. Elizabeth Banks wrote the screenplay and is directing the film as well.
Matt, true confession. Mm-hmm. I've never seen Charlie's Angels Full Throttle or the first Charlie's Angels. Neither of those films with Drew Barrymore and Lucy Liu. Missed him.
Don't forget Cameron Diaz.
And in fact, whatever studio made those, I don't know. Can we throw that in the fish tank?
It's also Bill Murray in there.
Yeah, he's in there as well. So whatever studio actually sent us a copy of the Charlie's Angels movies for us to watch. I have them.
You do?
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to review the DVDs. I think they're on Blu-ray for the first time.
Those are old, dude.
Right. So they sent them on Blu-ray. I think I'm, like I say, supposed to mention them on Cinemajaw. And
well, there you go. Job well done.
Yeah, I'm going to have to watch them. So I'm looking at it from that angle. I'm not very excited for the Charlie's Angels in that sense.
Did you watch the show back in the day?
I've seen the reruns, and I'm familiar to some degree. You know, it wasn't like a big hit in my household.
This is Farrah Fawcett, right?
It was Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah.
But I do like Kristen Stewart. And this looks like a fun movie that isn't taking itself too seriously. I think they got the tone right of the Charlie's Angels. I might shock you here. I'm going slightly interested. Matt?
That's not terribly shocking. I mean, Elizabeth Banks has sort of been on a bit of a roll lately. I think she's doing some cool, like, girl power type stuff, although, I don't know. This one is a little hokey, gimmicky, girl spies, whistleblowers, that kind of thing. I don't know, man. I really did enjoy those three. Were there three? At least two original films with Drew Barrymore, who was sort of at the helm as far as resurrecting the old property from the 70s. This time around, I'm going to ignore it.
Wow. I'm sort of shocked. Pat, where do you fall? Tiebreaker.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything of Charlie's Angels. Like, I knew they existed, but that's about it.
You didn't have the lunchbox when you were a kid?
No, absolutely not.
Did you ever have a lunchbox?
No.
There you go.
So I'm not interested.
Now I know what I'm getting Pat for Christmas.
2 ignores, 1 interested for Charlie's Angels. I know I'll be seeing it next week. Maybe I can drag you to the theater and we could get a review for the Jawheads.
Yeah, that's a high possibility there. Yeah, and I'll probably eat my words. I like a good action flick.
As Matt mentioned, we have 3 reviews, 2 of them a little bit smaller, but we want to talk about these movies. We technically could have went eye for an eye on Ford v. Ferrari, but this was one of the films that I got to see premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. So I felt like I might as well give the Jawheads a small review of the film, of what I thought.
Yeah, since it's dropping this week.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. So I ask you this, Matt. What does Ford stand for?
This guy's name.
No. Fix or repair daily.
I have heard that.
Right. The jokes about the Ford Motor Company are aplenty. Whenever you are the biggest giant in the room, you are going to take on criticism and major competition. Eventually, car companies began making better cars, so much better that when hearing of Ford taking on a smaller company such as Ferrari, Ford is actually the underdog. And that is what makes the Le Mans race that took place in 1966 so special. I hit the racetrack to see how fast this movie could get across the finish line.
I ever break a promise to you? I will put you in the driver's seat at Le Mans. You just shut your mouth and let me do my thing. All right. Come here.
Morning, Shelby.
Morning, Molly.
Up yours.
I'll go to hell.
And that's it, folks. Ferrari wins the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the 5th consecutive year.
Mr. Ford, Ferrari has a message for you, sir.
What did he say?
He said Ford makes ugly little cars.
Based on the true story of Ford taking on Ferrari in an epic 24-hour race in 1966, Ford v. Ferrari stars Matt Damon as Carroll Shelby and Christian Bale as Ken Miles. Both men, key components in Ford's success. Carroll Shelby, Damon, is hired by Ford to head up a team with the specific duty of making a race car faster and more sufficient than Ferrari can. He realizes that it is not only the car, he needs the right driver with the right killer attitude behind the wheel. Enter Ken Miles, Christian Bale. What makes the dynamic so great is that Ken Miles does not play by the corporate rules, so no one in Ford actually likes him other than Carroll Shelby. What we end up with here, Matt, is a classic sports underdog story and a film that generates a lot of national pride. It's that last part that caught me off guard. I could not believe how good it made me feel about Ford and American brands in general. I'm not a car guy, but I have to say the racing scenes are thrilling. The sound design in the film is incredible. I actually felt adrenaline flowing in my body just watching this movie. If you like cars or know someone who does, it is a must-see. Bale and Damon have great chemistry together, and they really make it easy to cheer for them. This is a fun movie. It's an exciting movie. It's a film with some muscle. Ford v Ferrari crosses the finish line with flying colors.
Nice. Is this kind of like a rah-rah America kind of thing, though?
Not so much. More it sneaks up on you that it is. I think going into this movie, I wasn't anticipating at all, coming out feeling like national pride, mainly because I think nowadays I don't even think of Ford. Yes, it's still, American-based company, but I mean, these corporations are so big that I don't look to them to be the driving force that's going to make me feel patriotic.
Right, no pun intended.
Right?
Driving force.
Yes, right. But you know what I'm saying? Because it's like,
do.
oh,
they're a multinational conglomerate.
Yeah, and who's ever going to cheer for these big companies? But the story and this idea that, literally, like Ferrari and other car makers were laughing at the fact that Ford even thought they could, be on the same racetrack. And to have these guys, like if you've seen the trailer, at one point the head of Ford talks about how, hey, we helped, build a lot of the Army tanks and stuff that was going on. And he even says, this isn't the first time that Ford's gone to war. And it's like just a driving force. They were just going to flat out beat every car company possible. They were just going to be the fastest, best car in the world. And it's amazing to see, when people put their minds to it, to see it accomplished. It's pretty cool.
That's some good actors in there, man. Definitely.
It is. Yeah. One other thing I wanted to mention was that Tracy Letts, Chicago's own Steppenwolf Ensemble member here. He's the one that plays the CEO of Ford.
Wow.
And he's great in there because, he's vicious. He actually, at one point, Ford had decided that maybe they should buy Ferrari because that would give them sort of that cool, it was getting to the point where Ferrari was getting that, the glamour.
Yeah, it's like when Google bought Fitbit.
Right.
Yeah.
Just happened. So they realized, hey, we can buy this company and we can, get our cool back, right? But Ferrari's like, the hell we'd ever let Ford buy us, and that pisses Ford off big time, and that's what really gets this driving force going. Well, Tracy Letts plays it so perfectly, and there is a hilarious scene where he's actually in the vehicle with Damon driving it at high speeds, which was just hysterical, and great film all around. Highly recommend checking this one out. I'm going 3.5 jaws.
Wow.
For Ford v Ferrari.
Nice.
And again, old cars, people, some people are really into older model cars and the engines and how it all works.
Especially the Shelby Mustang.
Right. You are going to love Ford v Ferrari if you're one of those guys.
Nice.
So that's not the only movie we saw, Matt Kay.
No. Many, many, many years have passed since the great Stanley Kubrick brought us the masterpiece known as The Shining. Recently, Stephen King, author of the source novel, penned a sequel book entitled Dr. Sleep. Naturally, they adapted it. It was only when I heard that Ewan McGregor was attached that I had any hope for what seemed like a doomed project. After all, how the hell could you possibly live up to The Shining, one of the greatest movies of all time? Well, Ryan and I drove up the snow-covered mountain to the Overlook Hotel to find out.
When I was a kid, there was a place. A dark place. They closed it down and let it rot. But the things that lived there...
Hello, Danny.
They come back.
First, I need to tell you that The Shining was a legendary film in my house growing up. My mom was so traumatized by this movie that my older brother would tease her by getting me to wiggle my finger like little Danny and say, "Red rum, red rum." It freaked her out so bad, dude, she would punish us. We'd get in big trouble for that. So the movie was like a legend, and when I finally saw it, I understood. I got it. The Shining is a masterpiece of family horror, the family just falling apart to the point where it's at the center of conspiracy theories and even had several documentaries made about it. What a heavy weight for 2019's Dr. Sleep to be tied to. I can sum up the plot of Dr. Sleep in 6 words, 5 if you allow a hyphenation. Psychics lure vampires to haunted house. That's pretty much it. As I mentioned, the movie stars McGregor as a grown-up Danny who, after hitting the alcoholic rock bottom spectacularly in one haunting scene, cleans up his act and gets a job in a hospice, where his psychic abilities comfort the patients as they pass on, earning him the nickname Dr. Sleep. Meanwhile, a group of psychic vampires led charismatically by Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson, called the True Knocked, are hunting and consuming the steam, in air quotes, or psychic energy of people who have the Shining. After a particularly gruesome and shocking murder of a young boy played by Jacob Tremblay, whose only role in this movie was to be murdered, the gang comes to the attention of another young psychic, Abra, played by Kylie Curran, and she enlists the help of a reluctant Danny in a showdown that leads them back to the Overlook. But who is the hunter and who is the prey? This is a well-paced movie that carves its own path, and despite the simplistic plot outlined in 6 words above, it feels to be way more than the sum of its parts, as long as you don't count The Shining as one of its parts. It's impossible to discuss this movie without the ghost of Kubrick haunting it, like the Overlook. And though I really enjoyed the return to the old location as a fan, it also was largely fan service that Ready Player One already scratched the itch of earlier. The roles of Danny's parents were recast with lookalikes, and while one of the best scenes in the entire movie belongs to Ewan and the ghost of Jack, seeing another actor in that role was distracting. I'm not sure if a digital recreation there would have been better or not, for debate. Also, there is one classic iconic image from Kubrick's film that gets used and used and used to the point of where it's comic relief by the end of the movie. It may as well have been Freddy's decapitated head winking at the camera at the end of Jason vs. Freddy, promising more sequels. Summing up, Dr. Sleep is a good thriller with some truly original and haunting ideas. It doesn't live up to the original, but then again, it never could have. It's way better than I expected it to be, and probably the best psychic vampire haunted house movie of all time.
I love that you keep calling them vampires, like it's a for sure that they're vampires.
What would you call them? Their eyes glow, they can fly.
If I was a jawhead listening to this and I hadn't seen the movie, the way you're just definitively calling them vampires, I think is a little bit misleading. They're not vampires in the sense.
The traditional sense
of
right?
vampires.
Yes, true.
You're just grouping them in.
Right. Do they feed off the life force of other humans?
Yes.
Okay, then they're vampires.
All right. So I want to get to the point where you had said that it has like the weight of Kubrick and could it live up to the original?
Totally. It's an albatross for sure.
But here's what I walked away with, I think, applauding the film Dr. Sleep with, was the fact that it didn't try to necessarily live up to The Shining. It realizes nothing's going to hit this classic.
Right.
So it's so vastly different of a movie. Yes, it's happening in the Shining universe. Uh-huh. Yes, we do get throwbacks to the Overlook Hotel.
Well, the entire third act takes place there.
Right. But talk about 2 completely different films. I mean, one has almost nothing to do with the other than the fact that Danny is now grown up and has The Shining. I'm saying those elements are still there. Mm. But
it's not about the Overlook.
It's not about the Overlook. It's not about cabin fever. It's not about, to some degree, there's some alcoholism brought up with Danny still struggling with issues, and that is brought up, and I wish that would have went a little bit deeper. There was one great moment in the film where they talk about it. But it's a film, Dr. Sleep, that exists in the world, understands where it came from, but is its own complete thriller. It's not necessarily like, hey, we got to carry the weight of The Shining, and we got to make something as equally as great. I think they just set out to make a really good story, a thriller, fun, inside The Shining world, and I think it succeeded there.
I do too. I enjoyed this movie. It definitely crossed the finish line. I think it would have been more interesting had they explored Danny's alcoholism and also his Dr. Sleep days where he is ushering people to the beyond and how he deals with the ghosts of the Overlook that are still haunting him and he's sort of dealing with one by one. That's super interesting. We don't get enough of that story. Instead, we get thrown into this plot, which isn't terrible. I mean, I did enjoy it with the vampire gang who, with the exception of Rebecca Ferguson, and I guess, man, I'm blanking on the actor's name. I know he's from, throw it in the fish tank, Pat. He's from Haunting at Hill House, I think. I forget what TV show he's on, but the guy who plays the Crow, he's great. But other than that, the gang is so hokey.
A little bit, I agree. But the element of the big fight, and we don't want to get into spoilers here.
Also a bit of a letdown.
A little bit of a letdown. That's what I was going to ask you, because I was a little bit let down because I think the actual action between these two groups, it just seems not of that world that we were in. Here's all these like psychic powers and, I don't know, like gruesome deaths, but hand-to-hand kind of deaths. And this whole scene's like, what is going on here? I couldn't believe, I wasn't sure even if it was real at one point. And then I was like, I guess this is how this is all going to happen. That seemed odd to me. One other point, you talk about psychics and vampires. I was drawn to the fact that the way Ewan McGregor talks to the young girl in the movie, to me, felt like the Jedi's conversing. How Luke and Leia...
Well, he is Obi-Wan.
Right. How Luke and Leia would converse, be it in the end of Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi. Like, they could just feel,
right. Yeah,
their presence, and they could sometimes... Hear me, Leia. It had that kind of vibe where you could just all of a sudden be, on other parts of the country,
right,
but literally be talking to the person.
Astral projection, that sort of thing. Which that was also a really cool scene where Rebecca Ferguson astrally projects to Abra, Kylie's character, and sort of gets caught off guard by what she finds. That was pretty cool script flip there.
Yeah. I was just impressed that the film decided like, hey, we're going to have some fun. It didn't feel to me.
I wouldn't say this is a fun movie.
But it was sort
bleak.
of thrilling. And think about
Thrilling.
Like there was like laughter at times, like just excitement laughter in the theater. You could just feel it at times. It felt good. And I think it's because it didn't feel so tied down to The Shining. If you're going to make a sequel to an absolute classic, I think you got to go this route where we're not doing The Shining necessarily. It's not a complete sequel and, step by step of what prior happened to a generation earlier. They're going on and exploring more of the world of The Shining and trying to explain it. And sometimes it's not the best to explain The Shining. Leave it a little.
Yeah. I guess I get what you're going for. It was a good movie. I liked it.
Anything else that highlights that we didn't hit, so forth?
No, I mean, I talked about all the things that I wanted to. I think that the cast here, especially Ewan McGregor, is really to be applauded. They carry this movie.
I did want to mention the look of the cult members when they would meet their demise. So you had mentioned there's this thing called
you really
steam.
like this.
Loved it. And the steam would come out of their bodies a lot of times through their mouth. Like it almost felt like the soul was being lifted out of their body in a way. It was just flowing out of their mouth. But other times, like when they're really about to like basically combust from the steam of the death, I thought it just gave me like the willies watching it on unfold. Looked really cool.
Nah, didn't grab me quite as much as you, but
you got a movie poster quote for me?
Yeah, here's the quote. Don't sleep on this shining example of a sequel.
Okay. I sort of went same kind of idea here.
There's so many obvious puns. Would you
I went with Dr. Sleep shines on its own.
There you go.
How many jaws?
This is a 3-jaw movie.
It's funny because this happens. Like, I feel like I'm praising the movie more than you. I'm going 2.5 jaws.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's weird. No, if it didn't have Kubrick looming over it, this would be a really good movie, but it does.
See, maybe it's because I don't it's not that I don't like The Shining. I think it's a masterpiece. It's a great film. But like you had mentioned at the top of your review, that this was so ingrained in your childhood growing up. It was not for me. I didn't see it until I was out of college, and this was one of those movies that was like on my list of movies I knew I needed to catch up with. Hadn't seen it when I was younger. So to me, I don't even feel like, again, I didn't feel that Kubrick was looming so large in the film. I felt like they were doing enough with the homage and the nostalgia factor, giving enough for fan service. And it was fun to see. I mean, who doesn't want to see some of that imagery back on screen? But to me, I felt like it was its own movie and not tied down by it.
Well, we'll agree to disagree, but I gave it 3. I think
right.
it's worthy spin either way.
2.5 Jaws, but I think we would both say kind of impressed with it in general.
Kind of impressed with it in general.
Right? Because I think you were probably worried about it. I know I was. I thought, oh, geez, I gave it an ignore last week. And I think you said slightly interested, but we all had doubts that why are they even making a sequel
for sure
to the Shining?
For sure.
Glad to see. So if we were doing this list, as we mentioned at the top, Jawheads, of 5 sequels that took too long and were sort of failures because of how long they took, I'll say this. Dr. Sleep would not be on the list.
It wouldn't be on the list.
It succeeded as a sequel for that many years later.
And that happens. That happens quite often, actually.
So I'll get us started this week.
Please.
My number 5, 13 years in between the original and the sequel.
Okay.
And it was an animated film. And I think that animation movies have it easiest in that the characters don't age. But Finding Dory felt flat 13 years after Finding Nemo. And I think in the 13 years that had transpired between Nemo and Finding Dory, Pixar had grown so much that this actually felt like a step backwards. I think in between that time, Pixar had started to explore so many new avenues, ideas, Inside Out.
Yeah, Inside Out was huge.
Huge movies with huge concepts, so that all of a sudden to go back and do Finding Dory, for me, didn't work. I didn't like that movie at all.
Oh, and then we get Cars 3, which total travesty. I was okay with Finding Dory, but that brings it to my number 5, and also 14 years difference from the original film and the sequel. And I just don't think this movie needed to be made. Certainly nobody really wanted to see it. Basic Instinct 2.
What?
Yeah.
They made a second Basic Instinct? I honest to God didn't even know they made a second
Sharon
Basic
Stone
Instinct.
is back.
Oh my God.
She's in the hot seat once
in it
again.
Also?
Yes.
I swear to God, I have no recollection of this.
They do the exact same thing where she crosses and uncrosses her legs.
Oh my goodness.
It's right on the cover of the movie.
Was this a straight to DVD, you think?
I have no idea.
Can we throw it in the fish tank? Basic Instinct 2, did it get a theatrical release?
I'm sure it did.
I'm stunned by this.
Yeah. So every once in a while we mention the Rotten Tomatoes.
You're sure you're not making this up?
7% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
Ebert gave it a 1.5 out of 4.
Oh.
And I think he was being generous.
Man. Well, I never saw it, so I
think I watched
comment.
like bits and pieces of it, man, but can't say I sat through the whole thing.
All right, for my number 4, into our 4s we go here, I have a sequel. Get a load of this. 28 years in between the original.
I think you got me beat.
Yeah? 28 years. And I think if this particular sequel hits and lands like it should have, we'd have a mega franchise on our hands. So it's a big-time failure, and it was a film I was actually rooting for that it would succeed.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
Tron Legacy.
Yeah. I actually had this on my list as well.
So, Tron, breakout movie.
Huge.
Ahead of its time.
It's a landmark.
Landmark film. Jeff Bridges inside a video game, and even just the subject matter of him being in the video game at the time that Tron came out was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. It was just huge. And you remember at the arcades and Atari, everybody had the Tron game. It was, we played it outside with frisbees.
Right. It was a bit of pop culture.
It was a moment in time that where Tron was the thing.
1982.
And so now, 28 years later, all the special effects, 3D was very big when Tron Legacy came out, so the movie was going to be presented in 3D. You had those cool laser bikes. The music, I forget who did the score, but I forget. Throw that in the fish tank. Sorry, Pat, loading you up here. Who did the score for Tron Legacy? But everything was lining up where I remember thinking, God, this is just going to be such a cool movie. And I think that was actually its problem. It went for style over substance, so much so that there was just no story. It was so flat that you walked out like, no one could care less if the story went on. And again, I think Disney's kicking themselves because I think Tron could have TV shows and so much, but Tron Legacy blew it.
They sure did, Ryan. Speaking of blowing it, at number 4, I'm just going to come right out and say 12 years after its predecessor, one of the best action movies of all time, Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, came out. What a disappointment. Arnie with such obviously dyed hair. And, I think he was just still trying to hold on. Now he's let it go and he's playing things for fun. But at that time, I think he was still clinging.
So I haven't seen Dark Fate yet. That's why we haven't.
I still haven't either.
We haven't reviewed it here on the show. But here's the kicker about Terminator 3. I would actually still say it's the third best Terminator. It's not saying a whole lot, but it's definitely better than those other two that they did.
You're saying it's better than the original?
No, the third best Terminator.
Oh, the third best. Okay.
Right. So, but it's better than anything else that they did after that. Genesis and I forget the titles, Dark Fate and.
Well, we haven't seen Dark Fate.
Right. So maybe Dark Fate is going to beat it when I do see it. But I'll say this. You're right. It's a disappointment because the franchise just sort of died after 3, right?
It really did.
I think once they didn't have the participation of James Cameron on number 3, Linda Hamilton didn't want in, Ed Furlong was out, end the series.
I agree. All right.
Good pick at Terminator 3. My number 3, into our threes, Matt, is a film 10 years in between sequels, and it was a series and a series that I was a huge fan of, like dorky fan of.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Remember VHS tapes?
No, I don't. What are those?
I used to have episodes of this particular franchise
Is
on
this the
VHS.
Smurfs too?
That's good. That's good, Matt. But no, believe it or not, I was a huge X-Files fan.
Oh, wow. I saw the first movie was actually pretty decent.
Okay, so I loved the series all the way through. Fox Mulder, just the best. Scully, I loved it all. Cigarette Smoking Man, and I remember
The truth is out there, right?
Yes, yep. The truth is out there.
Do you like UFOs?
I love it when it's handled in a serious manner, the way the X-Files did it. Like it wasn't hokey, right? Mm-hmm. But it turned hokey. I'm not going to say it didn't. But the whole lead up of the series into the movie was incredible. And then the movie opened up at number 1, and we hadn't really seen anything quite like this, where a TV show was still on the air, and then it went to a movie, and then it continued on as a television series. But the problem was it culminated with this huge moment of a motion picture, and then that sort of, nobody believes that the UFO is here, when we've all now seen that the UFO is here, and we're right back to starting point.
We knew the truth.
Right. So it sort of killed the franchise. Now it's going to continue on after you've shown us, and it sort of fizzled out. However, they had the chance to redeem themselves 10 years later when they came out with X-Files, I Want to Believe, because I still think X-Files could have been at least into movies and gave us like sci-fi horror films when they did those scary X-File monster episodes. Mm-hmm. There was room for that. Now with all the streaming services, there's room for like a case, let's say, that was 8 episodes long.
They may still bring that back.
They might. But such potential crushed by the second X-Files film, I Want to Believe. It was garbage, literally garbage. I remember walking out and just being pissed, like I wanted my money back.
All right. That brings it to me again at number 3. This is a movie that I have to admit is a guilty pleasure of mine. I actually like this movie. I've seen it a bunch of times, 23 years after its predecessor.
Wow.
The problem here is, much like Dr. Sleep, although much less successfully, this one had to live up to an absolutely epic director, and probably one of the few that's actually on par with Stanley Kubrick, and a classic film that is lauded as one of the best in its genre. Psycho 2.
I've never seen it.
Never seen it.
Never seen Psycho 2.
Obviously, Hitchcock did not return for Psycho 2 in 1982. But yeah, I don't even know who the director is. I hate to load you up, but Pat, can you look it up? But Anthony Perkins did reprise his role as Norman Bates, and he's rehabilitated. He's out of jail. He's done his time. He's no longer talking to Mama.
Hey, remember, these are supposed to be films that didn't work because you're
doesn't
really
work.
talking
No.
this up.
I mean, how could it possibly work? It's a schlock horror movie that it is a guilty pleasure for many, but it's not even close to the same level as Psycho. But it is Psycho 2. It's the direct sequel to Psycho, and it wasn't. It's not a classic hit that everybody talks about. You probably didn't even know it existed.
I did know that one existed, but I had never seen it. Into our twos we go, Matt, and I have one that took 20 years on the dot to come out from its original. Here came the sequel, and it was a big blockbuster in its day. I don't know who gave them the idea to even make the sequel, but what a pile of garbage we had with Independence Day Resurgence.
Yeah, it's a shame.
So, and it makes sense, too, because the first one was this must-see blockbuster, and it was at a time when it was a spectacle because of the effects that they were able to use. That was still very new when people wanted to see that on the big screen. Oh, my God, they blew up the White House.
That was cool.
You couldn't believe it, that they could even make that happen and look so real. Now, all of that's gone away, and if you took that all away from Independence Day, it's really not that good of a movie. You know what I mean?
Even with that, it's not that good of a movie.
So what were they thinking, except they do get...
It was Goldblum.
Goldblum back.
Yeah.
And
Smith did not come back.
No. And this, to be honest, I didn't even finish the movie. I didn't go to the theater. I saw it at home, fell asleep, woke up the next day, didn't even finish the
Didn't
film.
even bother.
So, Independence Day, Resurgence, stay away.
Yeah. So at number 2, I actually had Tron Legacy, but if I have to call an audible here, my one and only honorable mention would be 26 years after its predecessor, Superman Returns, which had all the makings to be successful, and some might even argue it was a good movie, and I think they could be right. I think I enjoyed it, but it was not a success. It failed, and it maybe was just at the bit of the wrong time before the superhero movie thing really took off, but Superman Returns did not soar like the other Superman movies, or at least the first two. It just fell flat on its face.
I think part of that problem, too, was that the first 1 and 2 were campy to a degree. They worked, but they were campy because they were 1980s.
They're certainly campy now.
Right, but they still work. I still love both the first 2 Superman movies. But I think they were going for that style deliberately because it was supposed to be a direct sequel to 1 and 2.
Right.
And 3 and 4 never happened kind of deal.
Great casting.
It was. But it just didn't land. I agree. My number 1, into our ones.
Okay, I'm interested.
19 years.
Okay, good. We didn't cross over.
All right. 19 years this particular sequel came out, and it was the 4th in a series after it seemed like it was done, dead, finished. Characters went off into a sunset even perfectly. But they couldn't help themselves, so they brought back Indiana Jones.
Ugh.
And the Crystal Skull.
They sure did, man. What a travesty.
It was. And for starters, I was thinking about this when I was making my list. I actually think seeing Indiana Jones, this gigantic cinematic hero, be an old man in front of us on screen is just not a great idea to start. You know,
are they still making another one? I
hope not. I mean, on top of that, you also have
Shia.
You have Shia, but you have like just a laughable story. It's not a great story, and just ridiculous scenes. We can't even forget that he actually climbs inside a refrigerator.
Right.
Ridiculous. Shia literally swinging on tree branches. Some chase scenes that are so
digital monkeys.
Awful that you can't believe that somebody like Steven Spielberg was behind the idea. It just seems far-fetched. Like, this must have been a bad dream. Wake me up. Wake me up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, classically, Fonzie jumped the shark, which is a term we use a lot. When something has gone off the rails, we say it jumped the shark. That comes from Happy Days. Now we say nuked the fridge because it's so just came apart. Like, what a ridiculous concept, man. I agree with you. That's terrible. But here's one that was just the biggest personal disappointment for me. Came only 5 years after its predecessor, but for some reason, in the 5 years between the first film and the second, everyone lost interest. The movie flopped, and it wasn't necessarily because it was low quality. I just think it lost its audience, man. It just didn't strike while the iron was hot. The first Sin City was a freaking masterpiece. Visually original. We had never seen a comic book movie thrown on the screen in such a way. The dialogue was so sharp. The direction. You even had Quentin Tarantino come in and direct a few scenes. This was obviously a Robert Rodriguez film from Troublemaker Studios. Great actors, you know, like a lot of the Tarantino regulars came on board for it. And it was just a smash hit. Couldn't wait to see another, because there's a bunch of the graphic novels Frank Miller did. And then we get A Dame to Kill For in 2005 or 2014. And it just, I don't know, man. It just whiffed. Like, whoosh, total whiff.
Yeah, I never saw it, to be absolutely honest.
Exactly. But you would have if it came out like 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah, I was big on the first one.
Right. So was I. I watched it like maybe 4 times in the theater.
Holy cow.
And then at least a dozen times at home.
You're a goof, though.
Yeah, but I'm not alone on that. I'm not alone on that. The Sin City 2, A Dame to Kill For, total whiff, total disappointment of a sequel.
There you go. Honorable mentions before we go to break.
I mentioned mine.
You burned yours.
Yeah.
I had 3 not mentioned. One was Zoolander 2.
Oh, yeah, good one.
Right? 15 years in between movies and just a complete dud. Right? Wall Street, Money Never Sleeps.
It's another Shia.
Right? Another Shia. 23 years in between. And that almost could have played a cool factor because the market was so different. It seemed like, oh, maybe this is going to work. Didn't. And last but not least, Dumb and Dumber 2.
Yeah.
Now, not the one that they made out right after. There was that one where they weren't the 2 in there. It was like a prequel to the Dumb and Dumber movies.
Right.
Not that one. But
Dumb and Dumberer?
Yeah, but Dumb and Dumber 2, spelled T-O-O.
No, it's spelled T-O.
Oh, that's what it was. I knew it was something goofy. Took 20 years after the original, and a complete failure as well. I don't know what they were thinking, waiting that long and then thinking they were going to come back and have anything left in the tank.
Very quickly, this qualifies, came out at least 20 years after the original, but I didn't even know this movie existed. Haven't seen it. Christmas Story 2.
Didn't know that even existed.
Right? It's true. It exists.
Wow.
It's hated. A hated picture.
All right, Jawheads. If we missed your sequel that took way too long to come out and you want to write us, shoot us a tweet at Cinemajaw or an email, feedback@cinemajaw.com. We're going to take a break, Matt, and when we come back, we have another review, a capsule review of Midway, plus we're going to get Chris Lee on the phone from Canada to take you on in movie trivia. Stick with us.
Let's all go to the lobby.
And now, Woody Harrelson plays chess with Chewbacca in 2018's Solo, a Star Wars story.
Think. You want to make that move. You want to make that move. You made that move, okay. I guess I'll have to destroy that little guy. Somehow I never get bored with winning. No, you can't wipe them off. They're holograms. Hey, Chewie, relax. Hey, try to compose yourself. Look, all you got to do is think a few moves ahead, anticipate your opponent. There's a lesson to be learned here.
The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy.
And we are back on Cinemajaw, Matt. Before we get to our review of Midway and before we play some movie trivia, we filled up the fish tank with quite a few questions.
We did.
I'm pretty sure he's going to miss something in there because we threw too many at him. They were going in rapid fire.
Pat's a professional. He's got this.
All right, let's open up that fish tank.
Wait a moment! It's fish! Isn't it?
DC! Wake up! Wake up! No, Pat, it's a giant glass bowl. Hey, there's some fish folk.
Who's coming with me besides Flipper? Here.
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
All right, guys, we have as they said, quite a few questions. The first one this week is the studio that made the first 2 Charlie's Angels movies, and that was Columbia Pictures.
Okay.
Okay. So Columbia sent us the DVD. I'm going to watch it.
You should do that.
Yes. Thank you, Columbia.
And the second question is who plays Crow Daddy in Dr. Sleep, and that was Zane McClarnon.
Yeah.
He also appears in Fargo and Westworld.
Yeah, Fargo. That was it. I was trying to think of what TV shows on. I don't watch a lot of TV, Rye.
Yeah. Fargo's a great show, though.
I've heard. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the film.
The next question is, was there a theatrical release for Basic Instinct 2? And there actually was, and that was in 2006. It was actually a noteworthy failure in the box office, only grossing $3.2 million in the first weekend of release in the United States.
Wow. It's a bomb.
Yeah, there's some jokes I could make about Sharon Stone. I'm just not going to do it.
It's funny because her career just has gone down that way. At one point, she was such a big name, and then she was going for Basic Instinct 2.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Right. I mean, Casino is probably the high point of her acting career, I would say.
What else we got in there?
Next question was who did the score for Tron Legacy, and that was Daft Punk.
Daft Punk. I knew the name, yeah. So again, when you're looking at the visuals, Daft Punk doing
Makes total sense.
It seems like, wow, this is going to be so cool, you know?
It was cool to look at.
It was cool, and the sound was pretty good. I've actually still teetered with buying it,
to test out new systems. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And the final question was who directed Psycho 2, and that was Richard Franklin.
I don't know him.
Not that familiar with him.
Yeah. That's all. That was everything?
Yep.
Jump back in that fish tank.
Will do.
Matt, Roland Emmerich, the man behind such movies as Independence Day, Godzilla, and The Day After Tomorrow, turns his directing gaze towards one of the more famous naval battles of World War II, Midway. It's a film featuring a large cast and impressive special effects, but does it have heart? I hit the theater to check it out.
There's this kid. He didn't think he could cut it. I figured it was just the usual jitters. I take him under my wing. He was right to be scared.
Pearl Harbor is the greatest intelligence failure in American history.
This can never happen.
The film opens with some text explaining how important the Battle of Midway was, and the following film is based on actual accounts of the heroics that happened during the battle. This is very reminiscent of patriotic war films of the 1960s, such as The Longest Day. This is not the only resemblance. Midway starts with the bombing of Pearl Harbor and then carefully explains what the U.S. must do in order to turn things around in the Pacific. Luckily, they're able to intercept some plans from Japan that gives them the idea that Midway Air Base is the next target for the Japanese Navy. With little time to plan, the U.S. does their best to set a trap and counterattack. Like the film The Longest Day, there are multiple storylines following all kinds of soldiers, from admirals played by Woody Harrelson, pilots played by Nick Jonas, intelligence officers played by Patrick Wilson, and a general played by Dennis Quaid. We get a small glimpse into the important roles each played during this pivotal battle. While this works when it comes to seeing the scope of the operation, it hinders the film when it comes to giving it heart and emotion. I'll give Emmerich Roland credit on the action scenes. There are some truly amazing and thrilling moments when U.S. pilots are diving down into enemy fire trying to get low enough to drop a bomb on a battleship. In the end, I think it's important to recognize these heroic stories of bravery. However, Midway came off feeling bland. I must also note, Woody Harrelson has white hair in this film, and I kept thinking he would make a great Colonel Sanders. So KFC,
Oh,
if
now I'm
you're
hungry.
listening, please do tap Woody Harrelson to be a Colonel Sanders. I think it would be a big hit. As for seeing Midway in theaters, I would do a flyby and check out something else.
That's sad, man. You know, I here's another one that's sort of like a rah-rah film. What's going on? They're making these quite often. Whereas we got like a movie like Jojo Rabbit, which I feel like, controversial though it may be, sort of tells important stories about World War II that we need to remember. Instead of these big naval battles and even things like Dunkirk, which I think were sort of
I like Dunkirk a lot.
self-serving, though. I mean, war is not necessarily something that should be glorified, you know? Even though I do agree with what we were fighting for in that particular conflict, it's still more solemn than it may be portrayed recently.
I agree. I mean, especially coming out of a huge conflict like World War II, you see where all of these patriotic films were coming from and the vibe of the country. So it did seem like it had all of the country behind these movies and watching them. And I think we've come to a time, like you're saying, where we don't feel that it's necessary to glorify war in any aspect, whatever side you're fighting on, the people who won or the people who lost. It's just, why sit there and constantly show us these huge battle scenes?
Right.
It's glorifying the subject matter that we would rather never come up again. Right.
But then again, I absolutely have no problem with fictional wars, like Star Wars, for example, stuff like that. It just doesn't bother me at all.
Infinity Wars.
Yeah. Well, perfect. There you go.
Yeah, and I do think, The Longest Day is such a great comparison because I believe that even starts more or less along the lines of saying this is the most accurate depiction we can get of what happened. And in that case, I do like that they're making a movie, as I mentioned, that sort of documents the heroics of the day, because a lot of people did unbelievably brave things.
Laid down their lives.
Absolutely. And did some miraculous stuff that took place that gives us the freedoms that shape the world that we live in. And I think it's great to note it as good and accurately as they can in the way that we do see film, such an important medium right now. It's good in that sense to say, hey, this is what happened at the Battle of Midway. And a lot of people are actually going to probably learn about the Battle of Midway from this film that, that's the world we live in now. It's television and film seems to be teaching everybody everything, right?
Yeah, for better or for worse, I agree.
Yeah, I did really like the depiction in the film of how hard it was to hit targets still at this time. We didn't have computer targeting.
Yeah.
So that was...
Stay on target.
Right, yeah, right. But they
didn't have the force?
No, so they were really... But I'm saying even in warfare today, I mean, it's so much more accurate.
Right. Laser, infrared.
Yeah, everything's going. But you're talking about, gunners coming after you. You're flying down into enemy fire. You got like a bomb, and yes, you got some targeting on those planes, but it's really like
rudimentary,
and I got to drop this, and it looks like it's so good, and it literally just misses the aircraft carrier by a foot, and it doesn't do anything. It goes into the ocean, and it's like, oh, so many moments.
In World War I, they dropped bombs by hand. They would literally pick them up, put them outside the plane, and drop them.
So that was all done really well. There's one particular scene where a submarine is trying to fire this torpedo, and I literally was so anxious. I could feel my palms like sweating because they got, bombs going all around them. I'm like, oh, such a big moment. And for them to miss, it's so crucial, They really portrayed that well, so I do give them credit for that. But
now I'm excited to see this.
I would say for a movie poster quote, Matt, a throwback style war film that ends up missing its mark.
Bummer.
Two Jaws, I would say.
But how is Woody?
Woody's great. And like I say, I think when you see him with the white hair, you're going to agree. He needs to be a Colonel Sanders. Two Jaws for Midway, mainly for the effects and sort of, like I say, sort of...
The action sequence.
The action sequences and for, locking in some of this heroic moments for all to see.
Well done.
Yeah. As we mentioned, Matt, Chris Lee, Canadian Chris Lee, is called in before because he has won the riddle segment in the past, and he went and he took you on in trivia. I know that he won, even though you're saying that you won. He did win. But we're going to get Chris back on the line here as he is the winner of the October riddle. So let's welcome Chris Lee back to Cinemajaw. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing very well, guys. How are you?
Doing good.
Doing really good. You're calling in again from just outside of Toronto, correct?
Yeah. I'm about an hour and a half outside of Toronto.
How's the weather up there?
Not amazing. It started snowing today. I could live without that.
Were you able to get to any of the TIFF screenings, living so close?
No, it's funny because I'm a teacher, so I don't really listen to podcasts because I'm not commuting to work that much anymore. And I kind of missed the whole fact that Rye was up in Toronto, and I missed all of that because I go back to school and I had a chance to even come down and have a beer.
Next
time.
year.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Next year, Chris, we may both be there. So pay attention around that time of year.
Yeah, I definitely will, for sure.
Yes.
Make my way down there. Who needs to teach, right?
Definitely. I had a blast in Toronto, saw so many great movies, and that makes me wonder, what right now, getting near the end of the year in November, what's been your favorite film of 2019, Chris?
Well, to be honest, not a lot of movies come our way here where I live, but my big summer one, I did get a chance to go see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which I really, really quite enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, last night, got the chance to go see Joker.
Oh,
nice.
Yeah, cool.
Did you like it?
Yeah, Joker was something else. It made me quite nervous, but the performance was just fantastic by Joaquin Phoenix there.
Agree.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah, that's pretty much where we were, too.
Speaking of great performances, in honor of Ford v. Ferrari, we are playing Matt Damon, Christian Bale movie trivia. Chris, you're our guest, so you get to choose if you want to go first. Let Matt K go first. There are steals, and if you get hung up on any question, you get one pick-me-up Pat. Producer Pat has clues to all the questions. What do you want to do here?
Well, I know this is a rematch, and last time I chose to go first, and I've been thinking about this all day, so I think I'm going to be the proper Canadian and be polite, and I'm going to let Matt go first.
Wow.
Oh, all right.
He defers.
Thanks,
I like it.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
The Canadians are so polite.
They are.
Yeah.
I know. You got to live up to that expectation, right?
All right, question number one, Matt. Matt Damon, Christian Bale movie trivia, over to you. In 2017... Matt Damon was in a film where he was shrunk down to a few inches tall. Name the film.
Oh, wow. And this is a number one question. Holy crap. I know. I remember this. And it's not Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
A mini Matt Damon.
Downsizing.
1-0, Matt K. Question two. Over to Chris. Chris, Matt Damon has starred in one Ridley Scott-directed film. It came out in 2015 and was about traveling to another planet in our solar system. Name it.
I should have went first. Oh, gosh, Ridley Scott.
Matt Damon in a space movie. Traveling to
Yep. Oh gosh, I even read the book. The Martian.
That is correct.
Yeah, I was going to give you crap if you didn't get that one, Chris.
Well, I was scared for a minute there.
All right. 1-1. Question three. Back over to Matt K. Matt, Christian Bale stars in Public Enemies. Who starred as John Dillinger in the film?
Was that Johnny Depp?
Wow. 2-1, Matt.
Never saw it, but, you know.
Got to stay with him here.
I didn't see that one either.
Yeah, stay with him here, Chris. Question four is over to you. Matt Damon starred in We Bought a Zoo. What actress starred as the head zookeeper who Matt Damon starts to fall in love with?
I'm glad I missed it, but not because I have the question now. I feel like I don't want to waste my lifeline here. I'm going to guess. I always confuse. Is it Bryce Dallas Howard?
Incorrect. Matt, you got a chance for a steal here.
Yeah. It's either Renee Zellweger or Reese Witherspoon. And I think for some reason I'm thinking it's Reese Witherspoon.
Scarlett Johansson.
Wow, way off. Way off.
Not even. Yeah, me too.
Scarlett Johansson starred in We Bought a Zoo. It's still 2-1, Matt K. Question 5 is over to him. Matt, Christian Bale has appeared in one movie with Russell Crowe. It came out in 2007, and it was a Western. Name the movie.
Are you kidding me? What question number is this?
This is question 5. Christian Bale, Russell Crowe starred in one film together. It was a Western.
Oh man. So, 2007. It was, Christian Bale just did that that pretty cool period Western-ish type movie, The Hostiles. That was good. That's not this one. That was really good. All right. Pick me up, Pat.
Wow.
I don't know.
Pick me up, Pat. Question number 5. What was the name of that Christian Bale, Russell Crowe film?
Your clue for this one is 10 after 3.
10. Is it the 3:10 to Yuma?
Wow. What a clue. Think, Pat.
That was a good clue.
Thank
Good
you.
clue.
Thank you.
It is now 3-1, Matt. Chris, we got to get these right here. Question 6.
Oh, I know.
Question 6 is over to you. Last year, Christian Bale played former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney. Which actress played his wife, Lynn, in the film?
This one I know. Amy Adams.
3-2. We got a good ball game brewing here.
Great performance.
Question 7, over to Matt K. Matt.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Damon has appeared in 2 films directed by Clint Eastwood. One of them was Victus in 2009.
Right.
And this film that came out in 2010 in which Matt Damon plays a psychic. Name the movie. Matt Damon.
Right.
Clint Eastwood directed.
Did Clint Eastwood do that weird, the Something Else Bureau movie where it's like the Adjustment Bureau? The Adjustment Bureau. Damn it.
That is incorrect. Chris, you got a chance for a steal and to tie the game. Matt Damon.
I don't know if I know it.
2 films with Clint Eastwood. One was Victus in 2009, and this 2010 film in which Damon plays a psychic. You do have a lifeline if you need it.
And what question number is this one?
This
Ryan?
is question 7, Chris. One question after it, and it's to you.
Yeah. You know what? Why don't I go for the lifeline?
Yes. Question 7. I love it. What was the name of that Matt Damon, Clint Eastwood directed film?
All right. Here is the clue. You will thank me after.
Now, Chris, he's trying to emphasize here is the clue. You'll thank me after. Also, emphasis on after.
Boy, club him over the head with it, why don't you? Jesus.
I know, and I'm still not getting it, though.
Here.
My Canadian brain goes to a Canadian movie, which is The Sweet Hereafter.
Hey, you're really close with that. You're really, really close with that. Just shorten the title.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Sweet After? I got nothing.
Is it just the hereafter?
Yes, the hereafter.
Oh, the hereafter? I have no idea what.
Wow.
Doesn't matter though. You still got a shot here.
Yeah, well, it's 3-2.
Yeah,
he could.
of course.
Yeah,
and it's question 8.
He could still tie it up. Last question of the game over to you, Chris. It could come down to a jawbreaker. Here it is. Christian Bale and Michael Caine have starred in 4 films together. 3 of them being the Batman movies. Name the 4th film.
Oh no.
Think about it. Chris, I think you can get this one if you think about it.
might, but
We know that Christopher Nolan directed all of the Batman movies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, gosh. Well, Michael Caine's in Interstellar, but I don't think Christian Bale's in that.
I don't think so
You
either.
sure this isn't a Matt Damon question? Oh, gosh.
One other film out there. Any guess?
No, I'm stumped on them right now. I got nothing. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Jawhead.
Matt, do you know this one?
You know, it was the Christopher Nolan thing that unlocked it for
And
me.
I was trying to give that to Chris.
I know. It's Christian Bale, and Michael Caine. Does that help you, Chris? And a little bit of
course,
the Prestige.
The Magic. Yes.
Wow, it was The Prestige. Matt wins this one, 5-3.
Oh.
Handshake.
Or 4-2, actually, 4-2. But it was a two question game.
Yes, virtual handshake.
Virtual
for sure.
handshake.
If it came down to a tie, we call it a jawbreaker, Chris. This would have been a tough one, and it would have been over to you. Better actor, Christian Bale or Matt Damon?
Christian Bale.
I'd give that to him. I think that's the correct answer.
Probably.
Yeah.
Didn't even have to think about it.
The real jawbreaker was this. Age of Russell Crowe, closest to. Matt, do you got to guess?
Russell Crowe is the speed limit on the dot. He's 55.
Wow, no hesitation.
No hesitation.
Chris, do you got to guess?
Oh, I think he's slightly younger. I'm going to go solid 53.
You know, I hate to say this, but Matt was right. 55.
Oh, man. Tonight's your night, Matt.
Unreal.
That's only fair. You know what? I won the first time around. Tonight was yours, so sometime in the future we'll just have to have a tiebreaker.
I think that's so.
Or as we call it, Chris, a jawbreaker.
Boom.
A jawbreaker. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling in, and thanks for listening. And definitely, next time I'm up in Toronto and maybe Matt's with us, we're getting a beer for sure.
Yep, absolutely. I won't miss that.
Awesome. Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys. Talk soon.
Great guy, Chris.
One of the best.
All the jawheads are great, and hopefully, I mean it, we got to get a beer when we go to Toronto.
Yeah, for sure. Jawheads out there, if you ever want to have a beer with us, look us up.
Most definitely.
We're always down.
Yeah. Brings us to the end of a great jaw.
How about
First and foremost, we got to thank producer Pat.
Thank you, guys. This was a good time.
It wasn't. We had so many technical difficulties. Not because of you, but I feel bad that you went through that.
I was trying to be optimistic.
Well, we got it. We got it right.
We had fun times.
You know who the credit goes to, in all honesty?
Who?
Me.
Of course.
What?
No,
absolute asshole.
Ryan solved the problem.
I did solve it.
He did.
Took me 10 seconds of you guys fiddling around
I
there.
shouldn't have said that. I'm just feeding his ego.
You guys were fiddling around for about 45 minutes. I'm like, well, how about this? And bam, here we are recording.
Did you ever hear the
episode
thing
of
about
Cinemajaw.
monkeys and typewriters, Ryan?
Well, get me involved a little bit sooner next time, guys. Matt, we also got to thank our sponsors.
Yes. Thanks to Overcast and the Chicago Podcast Co-op who help us get cool sponsors like them.
If you want to support Cinemajaw, the easiest way to do so is, come on, by leaving us a review wherever you're listening to this podcast.
And while you're there, please click subscribe. One extra button helps us out tremendously.
Until next week, I'm Ryan, Movie Guy.
I'm Matt Kay. And keep on jawing about the movies.